The activities all have captain, president, founder, etc. How is the admissions committee supposed to differentiate you? So this is a good opportunity to do that. Research is another good one. I'll briefly just address this. This is university level research. Okay, to the average high school student, research means Google. Okay, that is not research, folks. So being able to do university level research is also an excellent way to matter to admissions. Being a teaching assistant or some other sort of instructor. We see in the last, I'd say 7 or 8 years, we've seen a lot of tutoring, which is great for 9th graders. Okay, but once you're in 10th grade, you should either be teaching classes or running some sort of a camp or a program. And then by 11th grade, you should be either designing programs or being involved at more of a strategic level. I push my students to get involved with how schools will often work with other institutions, sometimes colleges, sometimes clubs, sometimes professional organizations. Okay, but again, that's expected more in the 11th grade. So remember, I mentioned earlier, 9th grade, experiment, try everything. 10th grade, achieve, and I think 11th grade, I said lead. Okay. Recommendations, notice I didn't say teacher recommendations. They're not necessarily always teacher recommendations. Sometimes they're recommendations from the university professor who oversaw the research. Those are very good ways to matter to admissions, and so on. So if you have questions about that, feel free to ask. And then, like I said, once you get to committee, we don't necessarily spend a lot of time on this because everyone already is an exceptional student. This is the difficult question to ask. This is answerable only based on what we see outside of the classroom in terms of what you do. And so to go through some of those things, clubs and competitions, I think that's self-evident. A lot of students say, well, the club doesn't exist at my school. My response to that is, well, then what a fantastic opportunity for you to start one, okay? The competitions, just because your high school doesn't compete in that or send a team, it doesn't mean that you can't compete in that as an independent. Usually all you need is one faculty who's willing to sponsor you and about $55, and then now you're in. Obviously, some of the more national level, higher level competitions you have to qualify for. But I think understanding high school teacher motivations is very important in terms of getting clubs started, entering competitions that your school doesn't even send teams to, doing research, and so on. Camps, there are 2 kinds of camps generally. Pay for play is the slang that we use. Generally, the value of the camp is inversely proportional to the cost. Secondly, there's a myth that admissions committees might actually care about the institution that's running the camp. We don't. The further irony is we don't even care if you attend our camp. Okay, I mean, we will of course notice it, but what matters is what did you do at the camp? What is the resultant output? And my recommendation to most students, in order to really matter to admissions, is at the end of that camp, you ought to be able to point to something and say, I did that. So either this is a 50-page report that we're going to publish or submit to magazines. This is a 10-page deck that we presented at a conference. This is something that we're filing a patent on. This is something that we're, et cetera. You need to be able to tangibly look at something and say what you accomplished. And usually that's going to be beyond the scope of the camp. Okay, the camp itself, again, I'll reemphasize, is not really important in and of itself. It's what you do at the camp. And if you consider it empirically, I've seen many applications get voted accept where they didn't go to any sort of camp where you had to spend any kind of money. A lot of these applicants who get accepted, they live in the middle of nowhere, especially some of the international students who get accepted. A lot of them are homeschooled. Okay, a lot of them can't afford a camp. A lot of them go to religious camps or YMCA or these sorts of camps. And again, frankly, we really don't care. What we care about is what did you do? In a lot of ways, going to something that has fewer resources is a better opportunity for you as a high school student to matter more. Internships and co-ops, again, these should be paid. There are 3 different ways that you can be paid as an intern. Don't think just because you don't get a paycheck, it's not paid. A co-op, if you don't understand what that is, then you're missing out on a good opportunity. You should probably ask in the Q&A. This is something that will really help distinguish you in terms of this second question, getting a real job. There are a lot of nuances to that. So I won't go into too much detail with that, but I literally have seen many applications favored over others because somebody spent a week working customer service at Walmart. And you'd be surprised at how much impact, especially in the essay and that we read in the interview report, anecdotes about when you were in ninth grade. These are all actual examples. When you were in ninth grade, you were a soccer referee and broke up a fight between two parents, two dads that were getting into a fight in a little league soccer game. Okay, and this was a ninth grade girl, by the way, and we wrote her essay about her breaking up that fight and talk about acting more adult than anybody else on the soccer field. Dealing with drunk customers at a restaurant, how to handle shoplifters in retail. Okay, how to handle when somebody blames you for something that's not even your fault. Say you work in food service, you're not the one who cooked the food, yet somebody's yelling at you for it. How do you handle that situation? Those are anecdotes that cannot be replicated in the classroom, most of us believe, in admissions. And most of us, especially we old folks like me, okay, we have these experiences. We're big believers in there's a whole lot more to being a successful human being when you leave school than SAT scores and GPA. And if you think just empirically, you don't have to look very hard out in the real world to see evidence of that. A couple of these other activities that really help show what kind of human being you're going to be when you get out. Athletics is sorely underestimated. It's also an area that I find is commonly, I'll say, erroneously managed. Choosing which sport you do, in my experience, I've seen empirically, makes a big difference. Okay, obviously team sports, is a good example, right? Being on a golf team, a swimming team, a cross-country team, a fencing team, the word team might be there, but we don't really see those as team activities. If you're a swimmer, it's really just you against the clock. If you're a runner, again, you against the clock and so on. But the golfer, it's you against, whoever designed the course. Okay, and so, there are a lot of specific ways that you can benefit from the athletic activity. And generally speaking, unless you're pursuing a scholarship at the college level, then I have a lot of specific anecdotal evidence that shows there are certain kinds of athletics that are much more favorable for your application in the admissions committee's eyes than others. Let me move on. Philanthropy. My recommendation is if it's in your heart, follow your heart and do it to your heart's content. But if it's not in your heart, I do still recommend that you show, again, what kind of human being are you going to be after you graduate? Okay, you do need evidence, at least a little bit of altruism and a little bit of experience, I would say, in interacting with just a large swath of society, especially students who go to private schools. I mean, the fact that, we read through their application and we're wondering, well, what kind of human being are they going to be when they graduate? And they've been living nothing but basically a privileged country club life ever since they were born. There's a lot of questions as to what kind of person that's going to maybe even be as a student, yet alone as an alum. And then hobbies say a lot about you, okay? So if you love cooking and you love chemistry, that's probably not a coincidence, okay? If you broke your arm jumping off a roof, testing things that you learned in physics, again, probably shows a lot of good things that admissions wants to hear. By the way, those are two examples of content and applications, again, from students that were accepted. You might wonder where essays and interviews fall in. They really don't fall in anywhere, right? These are all things that evidence you as a student and evidence you as a human being. Okay, the essays and the interviews themselves per se do not enable admissions to conclude anything definitively about you, but these are extremely important. I'll show you one quick, I wasn't intending to show this, but I will show you kind of a quick data point graph, which kind of will show you what do admissions committees really care about, okay? And so what they did was they surveyed a whole bunch of admissions folks, and this is what it looks like. Almost, what is that, about 90% of these admissions people said, standardized tests and AP test scores matter a lot, okay? Curriculum strength matters a lot. You'll notice GPA is not even on this list. Okay, it's in this other. Okay, and so on. Okay, but anyway, back to the essays and interviews. Okay, so this is a way for you to express this and this. Okay, but there's a false belief. I think there's a tragically false understanding that a very well-written essay or a very well conducted interview or interview performance, okay, is really going to matter that much to admissions. We admit many students, okay, based more so on these things. These are equally important, but we can see through this sometimes and more of this. And how does that matter to admissions? Well, a lot of times we'll see a very well-written essay, but then we'll notice that none of this coincides or is consistent with what's said in the essay. Same thing with the interviews. We will read the interview report and we'll notice that a lot of this doesn't coincide. Okay, so again, something to keep in mind. This was my attempt to cover 3 of the bullet points in that flyer. And so in the interest of trying to get through this so I can get to your questions, the last slide that I have is what should you do early? Okay, and so I have a couple of quick suggestions. Look into your future, meaning go ahead and, I have 8th graders looking at college applications, not to pressure them, of course, okay, but they ought to at least get a taste of what are the students being asked? What are they expected to do? And parents especially need to be careful of your middle schoolers when exposing them to college aspirations. My suggestion in a nutshell is let them explore the commonalities, the common interests. Let them notice in the application things like, hey, I already do that, or hey, I'm already pretty good at that, or hey, I've already done that for 3 years. And that'll really do a lot of good things to boost I'd say their ambitions as well as just their interests. If all you do is dangle Harvard in front of them, since they're toddlers, and I've seen that happen, okay, at least in my experience, that often has a negative effect, okay? Watch YouTube videos made by freshmen at the school, okay? I don't necessarily like to dissuade students from looking at a school's YouTube channel. I mean, my 2 schools, UPenn and Emory, my 2 schools have our channels, of course. But I do think that the freshman videos, they're more candid, okay? And they will address the topics that officially no school will want to address. You'll see videos like 10 things I wish I knew before I decided to go to Stanford, or 5 things that I hate at Harvard, and so on, okay? Don't necessarily ditch the campus tour. Go on the campus tour if you visit the school, but don't be a prisoner of that dog and pony show, I've got a lot of suggestions on things that you can do that will help you when you eventually write your application, especially your essay and or do your interview, okay? So, these are things that you can do while you're on the campus tour. And so there's some real specific suggestions that I would make, again, in the interest of moving along. Exploring during the camp, again, this is a suggestion that I usually make, which is often neglected. If you go to a camp, suppose you go to YYG, suppose you go to the Yale Youth Global Scholars Program, okay, or you go to, say, MIT Launch or something. The great thing about these camps at certain schools is you have access, obviously, to the campus. And so why would you not take the opportunity to explore every inch of that campus beyond the scope of your camp? As a matter of fact, one of my students, and I encouraged her to do this, she basically stopped attending her camp and was busy getting to know professors, and eventually that turned into something else. I won't bore you with the story, but anyway, be opportunistic, okay? Act on your possible academic subject area interests, and I mean do this early, okay? So in order to act on your possible academic subject area interests, you need to identify them, right? And so in middle school, you should be asking yourself, am I more STEM or am I more humanities? Maybe I'm both. If I am, which ones do I like? Do I like, am I more human geography or US history, European history, world history, ancient history, or modern contemporary, and so on? If you're STEM, okay, is it CS? Is it math? Is it the lab sciences? If so, which lab science and why? Okay, so you notice amongst the 4 lab sciences, right, your environmental, physics, chem, and bio, they're very different. They're very unique. Okay, and so you should always be able to identify in terms of why. And that's a very important question to be able to answer, by the way. Again, I won't go into further detail on that, but if somebody has a question about why is why such an important question to answer, I can answer that. Act on your possible vocational career field interests too. Okay, and this act means that's a broad term, so take action. Okay, and so it doesn't mean just do an internship, just do a co-op. Maybe you'll start your own business, you start a foundation, an organization, you start a club, act, go to a camp, go compete, act. Same thing, I didn't emphasize it here with the academic subject area, but acting on your subject area interest doesn't mean just going to a camp or taking that course or doing the accelerated path at your high school. Okay, so I have a lot more suggestions that I would make or that you should consider if you're gonna act, how to act on your academic subject areas. And most importantly, above all, singularly, make sure to, and I necessarily, leave these ellipses, okay? Make sure to avoid these 5 common mistakes, okay? And so I don't mean to be gimmicky, but that does bring me back full circle, okay? And so Chai, I hope I didn't take up too much time, but I'm now ready to take some Q&A, and it looks like we're already at the 9:30 spot. So I can carve out at least 15 minutes. I'm willing to do that if you think that's worthwhile.
Yeah, definitely. I think you can just directly go to Q&A section, and there are already questions there. So you can go down the list. We're trying to address as much question we can, okay? So parents, if you still have more questions, please type it in. We're going to go through the orders, okay?
Okay, all right. So I'll try to cover as many as I can and even group some if I can. So my child will be in 11th. She usually got an A. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we see black screen right now.
Oh, a black screen.
Can you share?
Let me try this then.
Yeah.
Let me unshare and then reshare. So stop share. And then if I hit Q&A, are you able to see, is it still a black screen?
Now I can see WeChat questions. Okay, it's still a black screen. I think I still see your.
Okay, then here's what I'll do. I'll, if in the interest of just moving this along, Chai, would it be okay if I just
let me just share my screen. Yeah. Okay. Let me share my screen. I go through the questions. And read through them and
sure.
Gonna get started. Can you all see my chat screen here?
No, I see the PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. 1 second. Okay, I apologize. Let me just pause share.
I can just read them out if that's okay. I can paraphrase them.
Okay, yeah, that's a good, if you can start from the top.
Okay, so this parent says, my child will be in 11th grade. She usually got A's in English, but this year B. Okay, that's not a problem. I think I addressed how a low grade in one particular class isn't gonna doom any application. The second question was, okay. So the second question was, how important is it to build a relationship with an admissions officer? Not important whatsoever. It's not even going to help you. Okay, so we're not allowed to, play those sorts of subjective favors. We also have to disclose, and we have to recuse ourselves if there is a conflict of interest. What AP courses are considering challenging? Generally speaking, the STEM ones. So that's your physics 1, 2, and C. Okay, your calculus BC. But just don't underestimate the course selection and also the progression. I'll give you a common mistake. Someone who makes a, say a high 80s in honors pre-calc, because they got a little spooked out, it's the first time they made something in the 80s, they're going to take calc AB instead of BC. Big mistake. Your transcript reviewer is going to destroy your transcript score if you make that sort of selection. Okay. And why? Because you look, in a nutshell, keep saying nutshell, you look lazy and afraid. Lazy because anybody, and this is the way the admissions people think, your transcript reviewer is going to think. Anyone who can make an 85 in honors pre-calc can probably make an 85 in BC, but more importantly, can probably make a 4 or 5 in BC. Okay. The problem with going into AB, if you make an 85 in honors pre-calc, is you're probably going to end up with something in the 90s. And now that looks, again, lazy and afraid. Okay. And so think of it this way, from the admissions perspective, do you really think MIT is interested in someone who's just worried about their GPA and wants to take easy courses? Or do you think MIT wants somebody who's going to challenge them challenge themselves so hard that they might even be at risk of failing? Not because of any deficiency in their acumen or their aptitude, but because they just challenge themselves too hard. Okay, so obviously we want those sorts of students. Could you elaborate dual enrollment versus AP? So yeah, dual enrollment, the most common mistake is students say, oh, this college is not going to be recognized by my high school. I'm not going to get credit if I attend, therefore I cannot go. Wrong. You can still go. You want to show that you are challenging yourself academically. And the couple things you need to make sure of are, number one, it is an accredited college. Okay, it doesn't have to be a fancy name. Okay, so some schools that I've sent some students to, San Diego State, okay, UIUC, Cal Poly Pomona, okay, as long as it's accredited. Okay, number two, the registrar needs to grant you full college course credit. Number three, the registrar needs to be willing to send that transcript and course credit to anyone that you want, which of course is fine, and that's going to be your admissions committees. So if you apply to Princeton, then you're going to tell Cal Poly Pomona, can you please send the transcript to for my admissions application to Princeton? Probably have to pay $5, okay, each time you do that. But notice that this completely circumvents the high school's involvement. The thing that matters for your high school is, in terms of dual enrollment, is you still graduate. Okay, so don't make this mistake. Okay, so if your high school does not recognize your dual enrollment college, that's no problem. But you need to remember, you still need to graduate high school. Okay, so make sure you keep track of those graduation credits. What AP courses are considered challenging? I guess I already answered that. Something's happening with my ability to scroll. It's kind of hypersensitive. Okay, so my child is in 9th grade. He's going to UPenn for engineering summer school. We're excited to go to a bigger city. We think we're going to learn a lot. People say the expensive may hurt. Number one, no. The fact that it's an expensive summer school is not going to hurt anything. Okay, and then number two, what's most important is what he does there. So as I said in the presentation, in the seminar presentation when I spoke, the fact that it's UPenn really doesn't matter that much. Okay, but because it's UPenn and it is a competitive, we actually have, I do engineering at Wharton, and then SAS, which is a School of Arts and Sciences. That's everything else. I don't do the nursing school, of course, but for the engineering school, there's several different camps. Okay, some are more competitive, higher levels, et cetera, than others. What's interesting is the types of people that those camps attract. Okay, so when you go, my recommendation is make yourself uncomfortable, meet people, network, make up projects on the side, compete with others, do something in the middle of the night in the dormitory, where you're competing. Go explore the campus and find out what other camps are going on, and do something with somebody who's doing something related to your camp, etc. So the single most compelling thing that you can do to help you in your eventual college application in terms of what you did at your camp is to do more than just what's going on at the camp. Okay, so again, my suggestion is that camp gives you access, right? You literally get like a temporary ID where you can swipe through to, the library or the student center and so on. You ought to be swiping to every inch of that campus, okay, is my suggestion. Okay, you didn't pay just for the camp, you paid for the access. Will a top school accept me if I don't have any sports in high school? Yes, of course they will. It's just far more challenging for you to exhibit certain character traits. Many of us, and when I say us, I'm talking about the 10 schools. Okay, so in mine, of course, is UPenn, Emory's not one of those. But many of us, because we were even athletes when we were students, many of us believe that there are certain very positive character traits that are very important later in life that cannot be garnered or further developed outside of an athletic, a competitive team athletic scenario. Okay, so I do recommend that you get involved in a sport. The good news about it is it doesn't have to be at a high level or competitive. It's the experience, it's the character development that you need to show in your application. Okay, it's the main reason for the job. No one has asked it so far, but no one has asked me how long do I recommend a student work at the job. So I'll leave that one alone. I mean, are sports necessary for an Ivy League school? I already answered that. And the sports are not necessary at all. It's just hard for you to prove certain things. My son is doing orchestra for 4 years. Music and art, I should have mentioned that. That one also is an area where people make a lot of planning mistakes over the 3 years. And it breaks my heart to see this. If he takes all the challenge, does he still need to take APs outside of school? Let's see. My son is doing orchestra for 4 years, so he takes fewer APs. If he takes challenging, does he still need to take APs outside of school? No, he doesn't need to still take APs out of school, but yes, it will help him show that he is more academically ambitious. He's willing to push himself. And that is a relative scale, and that is a continuous, not a discrete scale. So, you can't say once I've done 9 APs, 9 to 12 is usually what the max is. Once I've done 9 APs, I'm done. It's not that. What we're looking for is for your ability to push yourself. There was an application that UPenn in engineering we rejected. This person taught himself BC Calc before he went to high school, okay? But all his course selections were AP statistics. I mean, if you can teach yourself BC Calc, I don't know if parents probably don't appreciate the gravitas of what I'm saying, okay? But the course selections after having taught yourself BC Calc before high school, indicated clearly to us this is not a kind of student we want at UPenn in engineering, okay? And probably not the kind of person we would want later in life who's got that kind of ability. A question that related to that I haven't been asked is related to the SAT score. There's strange situations. If you don't do your course selection properly, then having a high SAT score is actually going to hurt you. Okay, and so how might that happen? Suppose you've been taking the easy road for 3 years and you end up with a 1580 on the SAT. Well, in admissions, we believe 2 things. It is not possible for a stupid person to score a 1580 on the SAT. Can't be that lucky. Okay. It is possible for a smart person to score low. Okay. So if you scored high, in our minds, you're smart, so to speak. I overgeneralize, right? If you're smart at a 1580 level, now we're looking at your course selection very carefully. Okay. And if you're not challenging yourself, then of course we'd rather take someone who scored a 1380 and has been pushing themselves, okay, as evidenced by their course selection, their GPA that isn't necessarily a 98, and their teacher recommendations, okay, plus their activities and probably some of the, so for example, they struggle in math, okay, so maybe they're still on the math team. They might be on the bottom of the math team and we might write the essay on that, okay, and so on. So there's a word I didn't mention in my seminar presentation, which is the word holistic. Okay, what holistic means is all of the schools, and this is actually all of the colleges, not just the 10 that I'm talking about. We use the holistic approach, meaning we look at everything collectively, okay, in an amalgamated form, as opposed to, in the 1970s and 80s, if you got a 1600 on the SAT, kind of didn't matter what you did after that, you pretty much guaranteed to get in. Okay, so long gone are those days. Let me just go through some of these other questions if I can quickly. Can you explain what a co-op is? Similar to an internship, co-op is a short for cooperative, okay? Whereas with an internship, you learn by doing and you get paid for it, albeit a little bit. In a co-op, you also learn by doing, but you get school credit for it, okay? I got accepted to Brown 2 weeks, leadership camp with a little scholarship. Do you think it's worth it to go? Again, all these camp questions, I'll just defer to the same general answer that I made earlier. At which grade would you suggest research opportunities are intern? It is not the grade, folks. It is how hard you are pushing yourselves, okay? There are many students who get accepted who are not, they're only taking an honors. Maybe they only take 2 APs. Granted, some of those schools are private schools that they don't even offer, or you're not allowed to take some of the more challenging courses. But though, so then how do they challenge themselves? Obviously, that's outside of the school. You have to wonder, how can a homeschool student get a 5 on, I think the most I've seen is 12 APs when they don't even have an AP class, right? So clearly you have to go outside of the school. At which grade would you suggest research opportunities or an intern? Ideally, it happens in 10th grade summer, okay? But obviously, if you're capable to do it earlier, that's another way to distinguish yourself. My child barely had any extracurriculars. How can we deal with that? It really depends on your grade. In admissions, we have slang for just about every situation, as you can imagine. So you want to be something called the late discoverer. Okay, the late discoverer discovers, hey, maybe I'm a summer of my sophomore year, or it's 11th grade, and I just finally realized where my vertical is going to be on my T-shape. Okay, those students can still be accepted. Okay, but there are some nuances of how to choose your extracurricular. Okay, there needs to remember holistic. Okay, so it needs to coincide with maybe a hobby or some sort of personal interest with the course selections. Okay, you need to be careful of which teacher recommendation you're going to pick. And a common mistake with the teacher recommendations is students think, well, if I just pick the class that I did well in and the teacher seems to like me, that's probably going to be the teacher recommendation. That is not the way you pick your teacher recommendation, folks. I would estimate of the thousands of teacher recommendations I've read over 10 plus years, I'd say about 10%. Every 10 letters I have picked up over the years is the slang term is a blackball letter. It's negative. And so some of you might be wondering, how in the world, why? I'm not that stupid. I'm not going to have a teacher write something negative about me. That's the whole point. You didn't know the teacher was going to write something negative. And what's a negative comment? It's not, oh, so-and-so is a bad student. A negative comment is something like, well, this student is clearly exceptional, very intelligent, but seems to just want to do the minimum in class. That is going to destroy your teacher recommendation score, and it might in itself alone, it will at least create a debate in committee, and that alone might result in you not getting accepted. Most acceptances, by the way, are what's called a split vote, which means two people, one person voted accept, one person voted reject, and then one person voted accept. So that's a split vote acceptance. So most acceptances are split votes. So that neighbor that down the street or at church or something who got into MIT, Stanford or whatever, just because they got in, I hate to say it, they don't know the secret formula to getting in. Chances are they were split vote. Okay, so just be careful of the advice that you get out there. I myself even never portend to be omniscient. Okay, often I'll tell you what I think if I were your admissions officer, and then I'll also tell you what I think other admissions officers might say. And guess what? We usually disagree. That's the reason why it's a committee process in the first place. Okay, Chai, I think I can go maybe to one or two more questions, and then I'll wrap it up. So let me just scan through here.
Yeah, we'll do as much as we can.
Okay.
Professor.
All right, so I'll just do a few real quickies. What's dual enrollment when you take a college course outside of your high school? Is it worth taking Latin AP? Yes, if you challenge yourself, but there's certain other activities that you should do with the Latin. Okay, most of them revolve around tournaments. Okay, but then also there are other things within etymology that you should be doing, not just studying Latin. Okay, can you show the slide of factors and importance chart? I suppose so. Yeah, and then my child got a 1580 when she was in 8th grade. Did she have to retake it? I can't remember. They changed the SAT, so I can't remember what the validity period is. Okay, so you just need to make sure that it'll still be valid. Okay, when she's a senior, I think I'm not sure if it's 4 or 5 years, or 4 or fewer years. And maybe I can do just maybe one more. And Chai, I hope somehow we're able to, save these questions or somehow. But anyway, let me get one last question. Is a heritage speaker of Chinese who took 2 years of language, another very good topic, would be detrimental course selection if I substitute the periods for other APs surrounded around my interests. Okay, so if you already speak, read, or write Chinese, and if your name is clearly indicative of probably being Asian, and I've seen this happen a lot. Personally, I think it's racist, but how are you going to argue this or prove anything, right? But I've seen many applicants or application reviewers notice last names. Okay, if your last name is Hernandez and you took 4 years of Spanish and it seems like it was very easy for you, okay, that's going to hurt you in terms of course selection. What I generally recommend is you take the AP Chinese exam yourself before high school. Okay, so that shows very well on your transcript. I also recommend that you use that strategy for the other subjects. People who are taking BC before or 10th and 9th grade, you clearly can self-study for the AP Stat exam. So don't waste your time selecting that course. Okay, self-study over the summer, pay your $75, get a 5 on your AP exam, and then show off to the admissions committee, you know, what we're looking for, which is, wow, you don't even let school get in your way. In your way, meaning your intellectual and academic ambitions. Okay, so Chai, I think, you know, we've gone way over. I apologize for that, but hopefully we covered at least a couple of questions. And one person did ask for the chart, but you know, perhaps I'll send that to you separately or something, and then maybe you can show it or something, because I don't know if I have my screen share ability.
Okay, yeah, you know, everyone, parents, I think we, as usual, we have so many questions. We cannot address them all. Anything you want us to share later, stay within our WeChat group. We're going to share tonight's recording because there's a lot of information you can go back and review. And I'm going to share the tonight's recording in our WeChat group. At the same time, if there's any important information, we can share it in our WeChat group. If you still have other questions about our summer classes, you can add my WeChat. So everyone, I think you can take a picture of the current screen sharing right now, and that have the stats, okay? But at the same time, you can watch the recording.
Yeah, there are actually quite a few interesting ones, and you know, this is one of my favorite ones. If I might, Chai, since you mentioned it, you know, I mentioned holistic effect. There was an interesting study that was done by Georgetown, and you know, Asian American admissions, it drops off because this is the problem. This is the mistake of these 5 common mistakes that I was talking about. You know, a lot of Asian American students focus so much on this, and they don't really get accepted if they were doing things on a holistic basis. And the other favorite one that I have is this one, the SAT equivalent. This is a famous study by Princeton that shows in order to be considered the same, an Asian application has to be over 1,500 to be the same as other groups. Okay, and this is just the reality of it. I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just saying this is what the data shows. Okay, so anyway, I think Blue, you know, Chai, so I'll leave it at that. I'm sorry, I just wanted to slip that in since you mentioned the chart. Okay. But thank you for having me tonight.
Yeah, let me just switch to my, you know, if you still have any questions, you can add my WeChat and reach out to me about my class, our classes. And also, if you are interested in consult with Professor Ian Moore, you can take a look at our registration at different program level. But whenever Professor Ian have some time, we're trying to do more free seminars.